Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we see that the gutless opposition party, or GOP, finds itself in quite a quagmire. We know that ever since the end of the disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election cycle, we have seen the Republican Party struggle because there has been this push to keep the entirety of the scorched earth policies and practices utilized by the 45th president of these United States of America, Donald J. Trump, throughout the Republican Party. We've seen it with the threats that were utilized against members of the House Freedom Caucus when they originally took a stance against the so-called American Health Care Act that was designed to replace Obamacare, but actually didn't do anything. It actually just continued the failed policies of Obamacare, thereby violating the great litany of promises that the Republican Party has made throughout the past four successive election cycles. In other words, the promises that they've made to completely overturn it and to dismantle it, that's just out the window because Trump doesn't want to go down that. We have now become the party of Trump, for lack of a better term. But part of the problem that we have here is that while they do have a certain agenda, whether it be trying to push through the so-called American Health Care Act, or whether it be tax reform, or whether it be trade, or what have you, they're unable to stand by it. They're unable to get that message across because the nation's capital there in Washington, D.C. is going from one hotbed of a scandal to the next successive hotbed of a scandal with no time in between. And this is something that my first officer, Jeremy Graventon, and yours truly have been attempting to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, about over the course of the past approximate 2 years here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. We knew that this sort of bombastic approach, this sort of braggadocio approach that is basically the cornerstone of the image that Donald Trump has created for himself throughout his 4 decades in the public limelight, would not translate well to the American system of polity. And it's because we know that the frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist, leftist controlled Democrat Party would do anything and everything within its power to attempt to gain political brownie points from it. In other words, that they would go out of their way to try and show that this is just proof positive that the caricatures, which are just based off of the most inane stereotypes of the Republicans, that we hate women, that we hate minorities, that we are heartless, careless, bloodthirsty thugs and criminals, is somehow true. Yet nothing could be further from the truth, at least with respect to the base of the party. We're sick and tired of the government intruding upon the facets of our daily lives, attempting to exponentially expand their scope, breadth, power, influence, and control, which ultimately just translates into corruption across the board. And part of the reason why there was that outlash of anger during the 2016 presidential election cycle, it was because huge swaths of the American electorate looked at the way that the federal government has been operating, the way that those political elitists, the ones who currently wield the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative Republican vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, have been thumbing their noses at us. They think their corruption's cute. They think that they are separate and apart from the American people. But when we remember that the United States is a nation of laws and not of men, meaning that we unite around the supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, the Supremacy Clause, is none other than our shared United States Constitution. That's what we have to stay loyal to. But we're getting around to it, and to achieving that, we see that it just gets swept under the rug. That both mainstay political parties are working against the best interests of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And that's something that can't go forward, and that is why people were upset. We saw it with the so called immigration issue. We saw it with the NSA spying issue. We see that the government continually operates outside its proper scope and boundary, and then just tries to double down on their efforts to bamboozle us, to keep us locked down in their dark and twisted agenda and narrative. And that doesn't help the American people. That doesn't help us achieve the laudable goal of reining in this rogue, tyrannical, and ultimately illegitimate federal government. And you see, our founding fathers viewed the federal government as nothing more and nothing short of a necessary evil. And certainly, they didn't believe that we should just hand carte blanche over to them to allow them to do whatever they wanted, because they understood that that was the straight and narrow path to tyranny, despotism, but above all, oppression. And that was the last thing that they wanted to see take root in the land of the free and the home of the brave. But unfortunately, with each passing successive generation, we saw the development and the rise of the progressive movement and all of these other nefarious factions that were not putting America's best interests first. These are the ones who believe that an unrestrained leviathan of an administrative state is some end-all be-all for the great litany of problems that we face both as a nation and people. It's as Alexis de Tocqueville, that great French philosopher who admired America in her opening decades, during her halcyon days, if you will, said with respect to those who push for this type of soft despotism. Those who support socialism are nothing more than New Age feudalists. And folks, when we recall that feudalism at the height of the Middle Ages was a static caste system, it meant that people were stuck by birth or color of title or corruption of blood into certain castes. There were 3 castes in the medieval feudalist system: those who ruled, the king and the landed nobles; those who were part of the spiritual work, that is the clergy; and those who worked the land and had no rights. In other words, the villains, as they were called. And what that meant was the serfs, the landless peasants, those who didn't have the ability to marry without permission, to have timber without their permission, and the ability to leave. They can't do anything without the permission of their feudal lord. And that's exactly what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists want to spring upon us. That is exactly the type of system that they want to put in place in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And it's disgusting because it has no place in an open, honest, but above all, free society like that of these United States of America. Unfortunately, we see that any attempts to go back to the Constitution, to go back to strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within its 4 corners, is being hijacked, is being derailed. We all know that the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media will use any available opportunity to forward, advance, and advocate the agenda of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. And when we have our own party assuming a populist position, conservatism's been thrown out with the bathwater. They've essentially told us that we're not welcome in the party, except for they want our vote, because if we don't, then we're helping Hillary. That was the argument that we heard reiterated time and again to the point of ad nauseum throughout that disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election cycle. They thought they knew best. And of course, the right wing, or so called right wing punditry and commensurate, by and large, continued to thumb their noses at us, continued to try and say that perhaps we weren't patriotic if we refused to get on board with Donald Trump. And then, as on my last Solo Flight special edition of our state of the art radio program, I pointed out that one of the strongest, loudest acolytes and supporters and surrogates of Donald J. Trump, that of Ann Coulter, is starting to think maybe we were right. Well, we use history. We look into this stuff. We see this stuff for what it is. You know, folks, we don't come out here and produce these programs just to hear ourselves speak. We don't bring this information to you because it's just as a way to stroke our own egos. No, we do this because we are concerned about the state of affairs in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Because for generation after successive generation, these nefarious forces have been doing whatever they can to undermine the underpinnings of this, our beloved representative republic. And frankly, folks, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. They are marching lockstep towards undermining us. And therefore, what we have to do is do everything within our power to not give them ammunition. We need to be able to have an effective message that is articulately stated and that is pushed forth to keep our place going and to stand up to the great litany and torrent of attempts to completely and utterly annihilate these United States of America, both as a nation and people. We all know that the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are going to do everything in their power to spin a narrative a certain way. They've done it since the rise of the newspaper conglomerates of William Randolph Hearst at the turn of the 20th century. This is something that should come as no surprise to anyone. What is surprising is that the Republican Party still hasn't managed to find a way to deal with it. Now, some might say that Trump has found a way to deal with it by going into social media, this new burgeoning field that allows people to have a voice, thereby cutting out the middleman of the media in general and of the television broadcasting stations and the radio broadcasting stations and what have you, that is a new way to reach the people directly. But here's the thing. It still gets drowned out. It still gets lost, particularly when you begin to reiterate the same lines, push out the same excuses, and yet you keep making the same mistakes in a repeated fashion. Then it begins to wear thin. It's like Aesop's fable of the boy who cried wolf. If you keep saying, henny penny, the sky is falling, sensationalizing everything, people are going to tune out. That's why that's one of the reasons why, rather, the mainstream media is finding their credibility in the can and in the tank. It's because they have done all of this sort of chicanery for decade after successive decade in an attempt to lambast anyone who didn't march lockstep with their twisted narrative and agenda that always moves hand in fist with the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist agenda. And that's because they have essentially fused themselves at the hip to this movement because they think that's the way to go. And again, I point back to what Alexis de Tocqueville said. Essentially, what these people are doing is pushing for soft despotism. They want to make it sound as though the government is this great benevolent benefactor that cares about our concerns. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. The government is the least well equipped entity to deal with our problems. And I know that I have reiterated this on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but it's so on point that it bears repeating again here. That there are those two fundamental pillars that has formed the basis of American society, namely self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. The American citizenry is always at its best, is always at its strongest when we are self-determinate, when we're able to act for ourselves, when we're able to stand up for ourselves, when we can tell the government that they do not have the ability to redefine this republic, transforming it from a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic to some sort of frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist dystopia torn straight from the pages of an Orwellian nightmare. You see, we have always been rugged individualists in this country. We've always had the ability to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and work to essentially bring this nation back from the brink of whatever challenge we faced. And that is exactly what our founding fathers wanted us to do. And we can see that from the immortal language that is contained within the four corners of the preamble to our shared United States Constitution, when it said that one of the duties and obligations, as well as responsibilities that we have in our capacity as United States citizens, is to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. There you have it. That means we, as popular sovereigns, must shoulder the burden of securing the blessings of liberty for ourselves, as well as for the up-and-coming generations, but most especially for those generations which have yet to be born. And as Jeremy and I, as well as our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program, without our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature himself, we are truly left with nothing. You see, this is what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists don't want you to know. And in a way, this is what the alt-right doesn't want you to know. Or the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, or as it's more commonly referred to, the establishment wing of the Republican Party doesn't want you to know either. Because again, it means that you don't have to rely upon them. It means that we reject their attempts to foist this leviathan of an administrative state down our throats and completely against our will, and that they do this without any thoughts as to the detrimental and deleterious impact and repercussions that arise therefrom. And I know this may sound abstract on the surface, but it's not. And so we see that there becomes this predictable pattern that we see in news cycle after successive news cycle, where the nation's capital over there at Washington, D.C. runs from one hotbed scandal to the next hotbed scandal. And the issues that are truly important to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people, get lost in the cracks. But it does something else as well. It creates a sense of fatigue within the rank and file of the GOP. They begin to grow tired of having to do damage control and engage in cleaning up or mopping up after the diatribes that the president goes on, whether it be on social media, or whether it is this perception that he creates that all of a sudden maybe the corruption within the Republican Party runs a lot deeper than anybody previously suspected. That's what this Russia thing is. Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb here and say that we know absolutely for certain that he was, calling up Vladdy Putin, the Russian strongman and dictator, every night to say, "Hey, hey, Vladdy, um, with my smally hands, do I just do this and say this, and will that let me win the election?" No, I don't think it goes to that extent. But the fact that it keeps coming up over and over again, and then the optics that the president has created by the methodology and manner in which he terminated the former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, James Comey, when it was said that he was going to expand the scope of the FBI probe into the Russian allegations, it creates bad optics. And then everybody's going to that supports him is going to come out here and say, well, Randy, Comey came out and said that wasn't quite true and said that Trump wasn't under investigation. In fact, Trump went out of his way in the letter in which he issued to Comey to say that he was very grateful and appreciative of the fact that Comey stated on 3 separate occasions that Trump was not under investigation for any illicit contacts with Russia. That doesn't matter. Because, as we have stated before, optics lead to perception. And once a perception, even if it is an erroneous one, has managed to set itself in place in this arena of American politics, it oftentimes matters more than reality, and it is exceedingly difficult to overcome. And things are going to get worse. The tensions are going to be ratcheted up because there are those looming midterm elections for 2018. And yes, folks, that's fast approaching. We are almost at the halfway mark for the year of 2017, as hard as that is to believe. And I know that I mentioned that on my last Solo Flight special edition of our State of the Art radio program. But again, timing is going to start working against the Republican Party. Instead of being able to show that they have a positive agenda, that they have something that is in the works which will improve our lot in life and help undo and unravel all of this great myriad of corruption that has been dominating this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours for generation after successive generation, then it's going to be an opportunity lost. We will have squandered our best chance to rekindle American prosperity in this nation. And again, that is why we have to take primary processes very seriously. It's why we can't just be lackadaisical or nonchalant in our approach to the American system of polity, because the more we do that, the more we begin to undermine our own security, our own liberties, our own rights, and what have you. And this is the other thing. When you look at a system of polity and the way that people interact with a system of polity, when you go from scandal after scandal and have this appearance of a quagmire, people begin to throw up their hands. They begin to say, I've had it with this crap. It's too much. There is no inkling of support for what matters to me as an American citizen. When promise after successive promise is broken, when lie after successive lie is told, and when the narrative that is being put out there by the White House and the press secretary and what have you, it keeps evolving, we reach a point where no one is trustworthy, because no one is coming to this with clean hands. Everyone is acting in a way that seems deleterious. But not only that, it seems intellectually disingenuous on top of that. And so the American people are like, I'm sick and tired of being lied to. I'm sick and tired of being treated as though I am some worthless piece of excrement. And when we see these scandals come to the forefront, We see that the rank and file of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, is having to run around and stamp out a bunch of brush fires that are starting. But at the same time, the fires that were already started under the disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime continue to rage like a conflagration with no sign of it petering out. And so it forces us to wonder whether our party's worth a damn, whether our system is still working, and that's the problem. It's not that the system doesn't work. The Constitution is still the longest standing document of its kind throughout the entire course of human events. In all of world history, no other nation has as successfully created a continuously running representative republic like that of the United States. And that's because of the natural law tenets, or the natural order of things that form the bedrock foundation of not only our shared United States Constitution, but our representative Republican form of government. But we see that there are elements on all sides of the political spectrum that want to do everything in their power to strip and deprive us of that, and to violate one of the clear tenets contained within the 4 corners of our shared United States Constitution. Because pursuant to Article 4, Clause 4, we're all supposed to work to preserve our Republican form of government. The Democrats don't want to do that. And we've even had Donald Trump go out there and say that he believes that the Constitution is an antiquated document that is hindering America. In his case, the reason that he's saying all of that is he wants the ability to work in unilateral fashion. He thinks he can do it like his business. He thinks that that is the way that he can basically ensure that things get done. But ladies and gentlemen, our founding fathers designed our nation in such a way, via that safety valve known as the separation of powers, to prevent one entity or one branch of government or one individual from acting in unilateral fashion. Because when a government entity or branch or officer can act with unilateral fashion, that means that they can allow the poisonous tree of tyranny, despotism, but above all oppression, to take root in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we, in our capacity as United States citizens, should do everything within our power to prevent that from ever coming into fruition. Because again, as we have so oft-times stated, without our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, we are truly left with nothing, and that is certainly what this system would unleash upon us. It would strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And folks, we can ill afford to allow that to happen. And so we see that Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan today wanted to go out there and talk about the cybersecurity initiative and all of these other things that, of course, just amounts to increased spending, money that we don't have. And the press was peppering him with questions about the Russian thing. You see, they're not going to let this go. And yes, the loudest acolytes of the 45th president of these United States of America can go out there and say all they want that this is fake news, that it has no connotation or connection with reality, but it's starting to wear thin. People are tired of it. Even the Republicans are tired of it. And so it's now reaching a point where even those who had supported Donald Trump in that disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election cycle, some of his earliest supporters, they've backed off from it. They backed off from it because they don't want to have to deal with the political consequences that are going to fall out into the public limelight from this. At some point, this breakneck speed. Traversing from one hotbed scandal to the next hotbed scandal is going to make them realize that this president has essentially become radioactive, that he is poisoning the conservative movement and the conservative agenda, that he's hijacking our time-honored values, institutions, and traditions, and it is going to leave us torn asunder. You know, the way that Barack Hussein Obama handled his 2 terms in office left the Democrat Party in shambles because he was more of an ideologue than anything else. Now, Rush Limbaugh likes to sit there and attempt to say that Donald Trump is not an ideologue, but I'm going to go ahead out on a limb here and say that no, he is an ideologue. He is, for whatever gives him absolute and complete power and control. That's what it comes down to. But that is not what the role, an obligation of the president is. Article 2 sets out the duties of the president to faithfully execute the laws and to be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of these United States of America. That's it. That's it. It's not to be the grand poobah of power. It's not to be a wannabe potentate. It's not to sit there and to attempt to act in unilateral fashion. None of those things are in line with the way that our founding fathers had originally intended this nation to run and operate, dating back to its foundation some 235 plus years ago. And unless and until we, both as a nation and people, begin to wake up to this and begin to say enough is enough, these things are not only going to continue unabated, they are going to be exacerbated with each passing day. Now, folks, I wish that I had words of comfort and solace to convey unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, as I sit here delivering this message to you, speaking into this microphone, but no such words of comfort and solace come to the surface because both sides of the political aisle are working for their own agenda, and that is exactly what the father of this nation, George Washington, in his near infinite wisdom and foresight, warned us about in that immortal farewell address of his that he delivered back in 1796. And what he was imploring the popular sovereigns to do was to disallow themselves from being broken down into disparate and competing factions, because we would start to swear blind loyalty and allegiance to these various factions and lose sight of the overarching picture and lose sight of that which truly matters to us. And of course, that is none other than our shared United States Constitution. And we've seen that for generation after successive generation, this leviathan of an administrative state has been moving us ever further in incremental fashion away from the clear and concise language contained within the 4 corners of our shared United States Constitution. Folks, this is all by design. It is all designed to strip and deprive you of your rightful and legitimate authority in your capacity, your individual capacity as United States citizens. And adding insult to injury is the fact that it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. It means that these pedantic fools, the children who are running around in their marble-clad offices there in the nation's capital at Washington, D.C., are going to continue to think that they have carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want to do, whenever the hell they want. Damn the torpedoes, damn the consequences. This is why they carve out a special niche for themselves. Again, this perversion of our system of polity is not the system of polity itself failing. It's that no one is standing up on principles, and the American people have bought into that erroneous notion of voting for the lesser of 2 evils in all election cycles under the mistaken belief that somehow we could magically step back from this, regroup, and heal the damage and the wounds and repair our nation and our political platform. But again, when we go from scandal to scandal, when we are just enamored with the subterfuge that is thrown out there, either by the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, or by our elected officials themselves to obfuscate the truth, it means that we are just, yeah, we're bedeviled, we're beshrewed. And therefore, we just cannot walk back these destructive things. It cannot be allowed to stand, because the longer it goes on like this, the more difficult it is going to be to pull us back from these nefarious elements, from these dark and twisted actors, because they have started to completely overwhelm and overpower our system of polity. They have begun to push us asunder. They have begun to pit American citizen against American citizen. And again, folks, this is all by design. The frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists just absolutely adore this ability to undermine the natural law tenets, our constitutional form of government, to allow them to replace the Constitution with some sort of a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist agenda and dystopia. We can't afford that. We cannot afford that. But being caught in this trap of endless scandal does nothing for us. It just hurts us. It just tears us down. But we can't afford that. How do we allow ourselves to fall into this position? It's because we keep looking for entertainment. We keep looking for shiny things. But it just doesn't work that way. Because they always overpromised, but fail to deliver. Overpromise and underdeliver. And then, when the outrage of the American people begins to reach a fever pitch, the feckless, spineless weasels of politicians begin to worry about their own career. And again, this goes right down to what my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, has oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that those who are serving in the American system of polity today are not viewing it as a civic duty and obligation or responsibility anymore. They're viewing it as a career choice. They're viewing it as a way to line their pockets. It's all about self-aggrandizement, and it's about amassing power and wealth unto themselves at the great expense of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people. But they also realize when certain scandals and repetitive narratives come to the surface and to the public limelight, that it's an albatross that they really do not want to have hanging around their necks. And one of the things that we see having come to the forefront here is that it came to Republicans supposedly defending Trump in the wake of the claims that he was going to end, or that he wanted Comey to end the FBI probe into Flynn. Remember, Michael Flynn, was that former national security advisor who was ultimately forced to step down due to these lingering and incessant claims that he had illicit contact with Russian government agents and officials, people like Lavrov and Kirilitsky, both before and during the height of the 2016 election cycle, and even shortly thereafter. But it's interesting to note what Fox News correspondent Charles Krauthammer had said. He said that he was surprised that no one was coming out to defend Trump in the wake of this. And when he said this, I was surprised that he was shocked by this. It's not that shocking, because we are approaching the 2018 midterm elections, and if this becomes a lingering problem or scenario or narrative, then they are going to be crucified in their races, and they don't want to face it. But it's important to hear this from the lips of the man himself. So let me go ahead and get this clip queued up, because I think it's that important to hear this. And let me go ahead and switch on over to that, and then we'll discuss it in further detail.
Well, McConnell has always had a dry sense of humor and sort of a gift for the understatement. And he doesn't want to commit himself. I think what's really stunning is that nobody, not even from the White House, has come out under their own name of the defense of the president here. You got an anonymous statement, and we don't see any Republicans on camera. And that is totally understandable. They've just watched over the last 10 days people who went out on a limb on the Comey firing and said it was a result of the memo from the Deputy Attorney General, and the limbs sawed off by Donald Trump himself without a flinch, and were left humiliated and contradicted. And then when you look at what happened with the Russian ambassador, last night people were saying the people high up who were in the room by name said this never happened. And then in the morning, it looks as if the tweets that Trump issued acknowledged it happened, and he had every right to do it. So who's going to step out now and defend the president in these denials, which could very well be true, when you've seen what happened to Republicans who stepped out in denials on 2 other cases and were left like on an ice floe off Norway?
That's true. It is something that needs to be considered. It is something that is dangerous. But unfortunately, Trump has gone out and said that, well, this has worked to be that he is just rapidly moving on things, and there's no way for his surrogates, his supporters, to stay on track of things. But that doesn't work. It's with all of these scandals that the narrative keeps evolving, that the goalposts keep moving, that we can't ratchet down the truth and find out what is literally going on. And so it creates this perception. And remember, again, that perceptions in the arena of American politics oftentimes matter more than reality itself, that he's got something to hide. That's something that has lingered with him and has stuck with him since the election cycle. And he's been unable to shake it. He's been unable to overcome it because he has no desire to overcome it. Folks, that is political pay dirt for the Democrats. That gives them everything they want. That gives them the ability, essentially, to control the narrative with respect to Republicans when it comes to the 2018 midterm elections. And you see, they're all about Russia. They're all corrupt. They don't care about the damage that they're causing to the country. That's how they're going to come out here. They're going to do it in a haughty and arrogant fashion. They're going to try and make believe that they know what's best, that they have our best interests at heart, and that they're going to run on this line that they ran on in 2006 when they successfully took a majority control in the House of Representatives. That whole drivel of the culture of corruption. You know, Nancy Pelosi was just absolutely giddy to have the chance to stand up there at that podium and sit there and say that the Democrats were bringing an end to the culture of corruption because the American people had spoken and that they didn't like the way the Republicans ruled with corruption. That's what they say. That's what they do. That's what they're going to, clamp down on it. Because they believe that it works. And historically speaking, it has worked. The Republicans need to get better at being able to handle the public relations message. They need to be able to understand that the media is against them, and they need to be 3 steps ahead of the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media each and every time, because that is the only way that we can control the narrative. Trump is losing control of the narrative with respect to this Twitter sphere thing. He only added fuel to the fire every time he went out onto Twitter, whether it was to say that Comey better hope that there weren't any secret recordings from their conversations if he was going to leak to the press, or undermining the claims of his people like McManus, when he went out there and admitted to divulging information to the Russians. Said it was his right to do it. Yeah, fine. Does that make it ethical? Does that make it a responsible use or exercise of his executive powers? I don't believe so. I don't think that that works in the best interests of the American people. But the problem is that it creates this steady drip, incremental perception of corruption, gripping the heart, soul, and mind of the GOP. And that is what is going to stick out with the American people. All the while, the great litany of promises, overturning Obamacare, implementing tax reform, lowering taxes, being conservative, all of that's gone. All of that has been pushed back into the background because, again, the Republican Party does not know how to control the narrative. But there's something deeper to it than even that. Part of it has to do with the fact that the Republican Party doesn't stand for this. They just make those promises while out on the campaign trail because they view us as cogs in the political machine. They view us as useful idiots to be utilized at election time and discarded and ignored and besmirched all the rest of the time. Folks, that doesn't benefit us. It certainly doesn't help to rekindle American prosperity. Instead, it leaves us groping for answers, moving around blindly, without a sense of direction. And it is for that reason that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, named the election cycle and indeed the entire year of 2016 as that of betrayal. We have been betrayed, and it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. And remember, this whole notion of scandals surrounding the 45th president of these United States of America, Donald J. Trump, is not new. It goes back to his days in business. It goes back, certainly, to the campaign trail. And it continues. It continues unabated. And remember that sagacious founding father and his near infinite wisdom and foresight, Sam Adams, had given us that impeccable advice that if the United States is to remain a strong, vibrant, and robust republic, it is imperative that the American people be a virtuous people. Means that we have the ability to think and act for ourselves, that we do not just ignore unethical decisions by our elected leaders, but above all, it goes back to those two fundamental pillars that are the heart of American culture and society, that of self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. How do we do that when we have a media that is just out there to lie at any available and given opportunity? When we have a president that is struggling with the truth, and we have people who don't care about the truth, people who don't want to be virtuous anymore, because they would rather see this continued notion of the American system of polity devolving into nothing more than a mere spectator sporting event. Folks, that is a surefire way for us to undermine everything that our founding fathers ever originally intended for the land of the free and the home of the brave to be, going back to this nation's birth. We cannot ignore this. We can ill afford to continue to tramp down this path, because it is the path that leads us to perpetual mediocrity, and if we are not careful, will lead us to unadulterated, abject failure. But as I have so frequently stated on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program, I do not believe that failure is the destiny of the American people. I do not believe that we are the type of people that would simply give up and hand everything over to a leviathan of an administrative state. But we are going to have to free ourselves from this erroneous notion that if we keep voting for the lesser of two evils, that we will be able to fix something. Or that if we turn to a messianic figure to fix government from within itself, everything will be hunky-dory. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. We've tried this in election cycle after successive election cycle, and it has gotten us nowhere. And if we keep doing it, if we keep doubling down on it, folks, that is the clinical definition of insanity. We're better than this. We always have been. But we've got to get back into believing it. We've got to get back to placing that as a central tenet of who we are, both as a nation and people. Otherwise, these problems are going to continue unfettered. There's going to be nothing that pulls it back and nothing that stops it from just leaving us in an untenable situation. Meanwhile, we see that Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan was forced to admit in front of the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that we have to get the facts on the Comey memo, where it was perhaps suggested by the president that he wanted Comey to cease investigating the Michael Flynn incident. Now, folks, maybe the Russia thing is false news. Maybe it is. But I'll tell you, right now, the way I see it, it is something that is refusing to go away. It's something that keeps coming to the epicenter time and again. And it is just playing out to the best interests of the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who have no interest in promoting the Constitution. But I want you to hear this press conference for yourself. And then we will discuss it in greater detail. So I'm going to go ahead and cue that up now.
There's been a lot of reporting lately. I think that requires close examination. Let me tell you what I told our members just this morning. We need the facts. It is obvious there are some people out there who want to harm the president, but we have an obligation to carry out our oversight regardless of which party is in the White House. And that means before rushing to judgments, we get all the pertinent information. The House Oversight and Government Reform Committee has appropriately requested this memo. And I'm sure we're going to want to hear from Mr. Comey about why, if this happens as he allegedly describes, why didn't take action at the time. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. What I told our members is now is the time to gather all the pertinent information. Our job is to be responsible, sober, and focus only on gathering the facts. That is what Congress does in conducting oversight of the executive branch. I will leave it to the committees that are doing these investigations. Just remember, there's an investigation occurring at the FBI. There's an investigation in the House, and there's an investigation in the Senate. So we've got 3 investigations going on. I'm not going to micromanage or armchair quarterback investigations. But the point is this. We can't deal with speculation and innuendo. And there's clearly a lot of politics being played. Our job is to get the facts and to be sober about doing that.
Well, of course we need the facts. Of course we need the facts. But the problem is, how do we get to the facts when the narrative keeps changing? How do we get back to that which truly matters in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereignty of ours, if we are running to put out brush fire after successive brush fire with no apparent end in sight? Folks, we can't overlook this. We can't just ignore this and pretend that it doesn't exist and pretend that it's not there, having a detrimental impact. And yes, while he pays lip service to this whole notion of objectivity and that we're going to root out the truth, it's certainly not been the way that the Republican Party has been acting. It's certainly not the way that his tenureship as Speaker of the House of Representatives to the United States Congress has panned out. None of this is playing out in a way that gives that any type of intellectual genuineness. It's not genuine. It's coming across as stilted and fake. It's coming across as though the Republican Party is corrupt. And mark my word, folks, the Democrats are going to have a field day with this. They're going to see this as the weapon that they can use to commit the coup de grace to finally end Republican control of the legislative branch of government. That is what my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I, over the course of the past approximate 2 years, have been attempting to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, about with respect to Donald J. Trump. That the man was not who he claimed to be, that he didn't have a smidgen of self-control, and that his bombastic, braggadocio way would ultimately come back to harm him. And the way that he came forth and basically said that it's, the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party, that we don't need conservatives, that plays to the best interests of the Democrats as well. It's something that comes to the forefront over and over again ad nauseum and works against us because it divides us. It puts us into disparate and competing factions. It just cannot be ignored. And again, it's important to remember just how Trump went about saying this, went about putting it into play and into motion about a year ago. In fact, it was a year ago, folks, that he engaged in this sort of chicanery. And again, it's something that I think is important to hear again, even though I know you've all heard it, but just to refresh our memories about what was going on with it, it's important to hear him say that again. So I'm going to cue it up, and then I'll connect it with what's been going on with this litany of scandals. So here we go.
Paul Ryan's different. He's the Speaker of the House, highest ranking elected Republican in the country right now, the chairman of the convention. Back in March, you said he'd pay a price if he didn't get along with you. What is that price?
Well, we're going to see what happens. He wants to meet. He'd like to meet. And I think we're meeting on Thursday. And we'll just see what happens. It's just more drama. But I think it's a mistake not to do this. We want to bring the party together. Does the party have to be together? Does it have to be unified? I'm very different than everybody else, perhaps, that's ever run for office. I actually don't think so. I think that
it doesn't have to be unified?
No, I don't think so. I think it would be better if it were unified. I think it would be there would be something good about it, but I don't think it actually has to be unified in the traditional sense. I'm going to do what I have to do. I have millions of people that voted for me because I have strong borders, because I want strong trade. I want good trade. I want trade. I don't want to be an isolationist, but what's happening with China, what's happening with Japan, what's happening with Mexico, they're just absolutely eating our lunch. It's a shame. It's terrible. So I have to stay true to my principles also. And I'm a conservative, but don't forget, this is called the Republican Party. It's not called the Conservative Party. You know, there are conservative parties. This is called the Republican Party. I am a conservative.
Well, Trump's.
So there we have it. That was when he was sitting there saying that it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party, and that he has to stay true to his principles. Okay, that's all well and good, but your principles cannot go against the Constitution. And it is not in your best interest to weaken your party overall, because what that does to us is it allows our political opponents to control the narrative. You know, one of the things that I've oftentimes lamented about on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is the fact that the Republican Party has always been perpetually on the defense. We don't know how to get ahead of these things. We don't know how to spin the narrative in a way that it operates in our best interests. And as a direct consequence of that, we are always playing catch up. We're always behind the eight ball. Now, yes, I know that a lot of people will sit there and try and say, well, the reason that we're always behind, the reason that we're always playing catch up is because the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media control the media. And they have done so for a half century or more now, folks. But here's the thing. We know that. We've seen it in generation after successive generation. Why is it that we are seemingly incapable of finding a way to get our message out and to have it resonate with the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours? It's because our leadership is feckless. It's because our leadership is not dedicated to the time-honored values, institutions, and traditions that we know and love. in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And therefore, it means that we are constantly groping around blindly, trying to stand for something when our leaders stand for nothing. And when you stand for nothing, in point of fact, you fall for anything. That's where we are. That is the danger that we are facing, both as a nation and people. And again, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. We can't just ignore where we are. We can't just pretend as though everything that has been happening is something we can ignore. We can't just keep pretending that our words, deeds, and actions don't have consequences, because again, nothing could be further from the truth. So long as we are unwilling to hold ourselves accountable, to hold each other accountable, to hold our elected officials accountable for their words, deeds, and actions, then these sorts of scandals are going to continue. They're going to worsen. And the frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist leftists will pounce upon this. They will seize upon this opportunity to continue to push our nation further astray, to further distance and divorce ourselves from the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And folks, we have seen the detrimental and deleterious impacts, ramifications, and repercussions that arise out of that. Why is it that ultimately no one in either one of the two mainstay political parties in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours are trying to go back to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, is none other than our shared United States Constitution? Folks, I know I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. It's because they have all become addicted to this unfettered power. When they go into the nation's capital over there at Washington, D.C., they allow themselves to be corrupted by the sheer splendor of the place. They get lost. They lose sight of who they are. They lose sight of what's important, and they think that they can have all the answers. They think that by being up there on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., that they have greater insight to the bigger picture than the rest of us do. And in certain ways they do, but by and large, they don't. And remember, those immortal words that open the preamble to our shared United States Constitution are "we the people." That means we the people own this nation. We the people own the Constitution. We the people are the ultimate masters of the government, not the other way around. But you wouldn't know that looking at the way that this modern arena of American politics is working. And it's because the government has assumed a position where it is working in staunch opposition to the hopes, dreams, and future aspirations of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people of these United States of America. I wish that wasn't true. But when we examine this in an objective fashion, that is the one inexorable conclusion that sane, rational, logical thinking human beings would reach. But with the cult of personality that has developed on both sides of the political aisle, and the fact that we have allowed our system of polity to devolve into nothing short of a mere spectator sporting event, we are not discussing the lofty political philosophies and ideologies that propelled this nation to such lofty heights in her relatively brief yet illustrious history on God's green earth. We're not talking about practicable, real world solutions because there is all of this subterfuge out there. And when you put a deluge of corrupt scandal after corrupt scandal in the public limelight, of course, public confidence in the system of government and polity in general wanes and ultimately fails. It's a bit like Cloward and Piven. Scandal after scandal to overwhelm the American people so that they come to whatever nefarious force is attempting to implement even more corruption on bended knee and say, save us from ourselves. Because when you stop and think about it with a modicum of objectivity, that's exactly what we're doing to ourselves. That's exactly what we're allowing to come to fruition in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And it is shameful. Remember again that sagacious founding father, Sam Adams, said that in order for the United States of America to be a strong, vibrant, and robust republic, the people have to be a virtuous people. Well, since the people are in charge of vetting their elected officials and their representatives, that means that when we fail to properly vet them using the only litmus test that matters, that of our shared United States Constitution, then we're not being virtuous. Folks, we can't ignore that. It keeps coming back up to the surface. It keeps coming back to haunt us. And unless and until we awaken to this fact, unless and until we begin to walk it back and to get back to a modicum of sanity, then these things are going to get worse. There's no signs of it improving within the foreseeable future. There's no signs that the moving goalposts will be firmly implanted in the ground so that the American people can get down to the truth, so that we can get a sense of stability back in this country again. And of course, the Democrats are just absolutely adoring this chaos. It allows them to come forth and say, looky, looky, the culture of corruption's back. Anytime the majority of the political branches of government are ceded to the Republicans, it always allows there to be corruption. This, as they completely disregard the fact that they are even more corrupt. But, ladies and gentlemen, two wrongs don't make a right. We can't just sit there and say, yeah, but the Democrats are worse. The one thing that Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, got right in that clip that I played just a while back was irrespective of what political party's in control, we have to have accountability. Again, going back to that notion that we must be a virtuous people. If the government is a representation or a microcosm of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, that means that there is a lack of virtue, a disconnect from virtue or having high moral standards within popular culture and government as well. And we have to take a step back from this, divorce ourselves from our emotions, and begin to truly grapple with this. But the first step of grappling with it is admitting that this problem exists in the first place. And when we are so enamored with the cult of personality, when we are so hell-bent on finding some sort of a messianic figure to ride down on a cloud from providence above to save us from ourselves, it makes it nigh impossible for us to do that. We can't even force ourselves to begin the journey to start restoring American prosperity. Folks, we can ill afford to allow that to come to the fruition. We cannot allow that to come to the forefront. We are already in the midst of an identity crisis coupled with a slew of constitutional crises brought about by generation after successive generation of failed government and public policy positions. Everybody's sitting here saying that at least Trump is better than Hillary, or Trump is doing nothing more corrupt than his predecessor in Barack Hussein Obama. Folks, those are the defenses that are utilized by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists each and every time they are caught red-handed with their hand in the cookie jar. Now, we can't afford that. We can't just stand idly by and allow that to go unchecked or unchallenged, because then it gives those who are currently wielding the reins of political power, those elitists who thumb their noses at the true breadwinners in this country, we the people, to believe that they have carte blanche to continue this, unabated, unchecked, but above all, unchallenged. And therefore, they begin to see themselves as a cut above us. I can remember how people were very upset when that so-called Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, or as it's known in the common American vernacular, Obamacare, where the legislature basically exempted themselves from it. It's because they realized what a boondoggle it was. It's not about health care. Folks, it's about power, manipulation, corruption, but above all, control. They want and seek, in incessant fashion and incremental fashion, to dominate and micromanage the facets of our daily lives. Yet when we look at the foundational documents of these United States of America, be it the Declaration of Independence, be it the Articles of Confederation, be it the Constitution itself, or be it the numerous correspondences and speeches and writings of our founding fathers, we see that they did not want the government to be able to micromanage the facets of our daily lives. Again, need I remind you that our founding fathers viewed the government as nothing short of a necessary evil. And part of the evolutionary process of the development of our federal government was that they saw that the Articles of Confederation, the first governing body of documents for the United States, did not give the government enough power to secure the blessings of liberty. But they were hesitant to give the government even the limited amount of power that was diverged upon it or enumerated unto it by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And that is why the founding fathers, who were the framers of the Constitution, saw fit to include those immortal words at the opening of the preamble to our shared United States Constitution, "We the people." That was to state in no uncertain terms that we the people are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, that we the people delegated certain powers and authorities unto the federal government, and that means that when the federal government is in breach of the contract that is our Constitution, and make no bones about it, folks, the Constitution is the greatest social compact or contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above, then they are in breach of it. That is why we have in the First Amendment one of the most least understood and least utilized attributes of the First Amendment, the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievance. Now, people are looking at the government as something that has created grievances. Obamacare has created a litany of grievances for the American people. That is why they wanted a complete overhaul, a complete overturning and disruption of that debacle known as Obamacare. It's because they realized that it was working against their hopes, dreams, and future aspirations, that it was undermining their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, and yet both of the mainstay political parties are doubling down on it. They're maintaining the status quo. They are refusing to take the steps that are necessary to bring a swift and immediate end to those things that have been most detrimental to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people of the United States of America. And as a consequence of that, things are continuing in their deathward spiral. Things are not improving in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I wish that this weren't the case, but when we examine this under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity, what other conclusion can we logically reach? It is my contention that there is no other logical conclusion that we can reach either as a nation or people. And so, therefore, again, it falls back onto this notion that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, must foster a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. Because in so doing, we empower ourselves to put our collective foot down and say, no, you cannot fundamentally, drastically, and dare I say, irreparably transform these United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some sort of frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist leftist dystopia torn straight from the pages of an Orwellian nightmare. But again, folks, it's going to require that we be more proactive. It is going to require that we be more vigilant. And I fully realize that that is far easier said than done, but done it must be. And if there is any people on the face of God's green earth who are truly, and I mean truly capable of accomplishing this, it is the American people. Because as the old adage goes, nothing worth having ever comes easily. Yes, we have our work cut out for us. We're going to have to push through this. We're going to have to push our heads down and continue to push forward towards restoring American vitality and prosperity. And when we do that, when we embrace our Constitution, when we begin to hold our elected leaders accountable for their words, deeds, and actions, just as we do each other for the same and ourselves for the same, we become self-determinate again. Because remember, those fundamental pillars that form the foundation of our American system of polity, then we have the capability of taking this nation back, of getting back to responsibility. We are thereby self-determinant. That's when we are at our best. That's when we are at our greatest. That is when nobody can work against us. Because nobody can take away that which was endowed to us by our Creator. You see, folks, just how important that is. You see how that sticks with us here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. It allows us to be the people that our founding fathers expected us to be. And it's not just trying to keep ourselves stuck in the past, some non-existent perfect past, as so many on the left attempt to say that that's what we do. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. And the way that these scandals are going about, and the way that the defense is starting to chip away and fall away from it, speaks volumes about the fact that the Republican Party has gotten away from that. And it has to do with how the government has essentially allowed itself to transform into that leviathan of a nameless, faceless, and ultimately unaccountable administrative state. The entire design of that system was to whittle the power away from the American people, to put it in the hands of those elitists who thumb their noses at us and believe that they know what's best. And each and every time that comes to the forefront, each and every time that that's adopted, it works against us. We cannot afford that. We cannot bow down to that. We cannot allow that to be the way that this nation operates. Because in so doing, we weaken ourselves. In so doing, we place ourselves at the mercy of a federal government that has no interest in looking out for our best interests. And of course, we open the floodgates for these detrimental sorts of perceptions, even if they are erroneous, even if they have no basis in reality, to take foot and root in this land. And the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists will use it to bludgeon us over and over again, repeatedly, till there's nothing left. Well, you know, we can't just sit back and think that the left has been completely defeated. You cannot so easily defeat an ideology. And the fact that we are failing to deliver the litany of promises that we've made in the past 4 successive election cycles, and the fact that we keep going from one scandal to another scandal, just gives them more ammunition to pelt us and sling us with. Folks, it's not a wise position to keep repeating the same mistakes. And Eric Erickson over there at The Resurgence said that with respect to the leaks, a lot of these leakers are pro-Trump people. And they're saying that Trump just doesn't want to take their advice. He cannot take even constructive criticism, so they leak it to the press in the hopes that this will cajole him into taking corrective measures, correcting the behavior that is detrimental and harmful to the Republican Party and to his own agenda. But folks, he's not going to do that. And in the end, it weakens us. So instead of resolving the great litany of problems that we face both as a nation and people, we're having to stamp out all of these little fires that are 9 times out of 10 created by the president himself, by the way that he engages with the public, by the way that he handles the myriad of scandals that are swirling around him and forming a conflagration that is threatening to undermine the entire political platform of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. How do we overcome this? The way that we overcome any and all of these problems in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. The way we overcome it is that we go back to strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the 4 corners of our shared United States Constitution at all levels of government, meaning from the municipal and local, to the county, to the state, right on up to the limited power, the federal government. In so doing, we unlock the chains and shackles of governmental tyranny, bondage, servitude, but above all, oppression that has been hampering the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, for far too long now. That is the necessary path we must traverse. There is no alternate course available to us. And the sooner that we wake up to this, and the sooner that we realize this, the better off we will be, both as a nation and people. And so, we must foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That's why we produce these shows, folks. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol Folks, no, she is not there to create scandal. She's just there to pour you some alcohol. As always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright. I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. Should you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic suggestions, please feel free to leave them either on the comment section here on our YouTube page or on our Google Plus page or even our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us over there on Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. You will also find the link to the Blogspot account that is chock full of useful information. And just as you will find on the description section of today's Solo Flight Special Edition of our state-of-the-art radio program, you will find the link to the Cafe Press account. Folks, at the Cafe Press account, we have all sorts of trinkets, goodies, novelty items, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence logo on it, or the First Class Passenger logo on it, or even the Uplifting America logos on it. And it's on all sorts of things: hats, shirts, shoes, jewelry, neckties, mugs, shot glasses, drinking glasses, clocks, tote bags, laptop bags, sleeves and protectors, phone sleeves and protectors, you name it. It's all there and at reasonable prices. You simply can't go wrong with the Cafe Press account. So, folks, go ahead and take a gander at it. Give us a little bit of support. Oh, and if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel. All subscribers are welcome here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. We love having your participation. We love having your input. We produce these shows for you. We couldn't do it without you. With that said, we hope to see you again next time. Please do take care.